The Mustang's hooves struck the corral fence with a thunderous crack that echoed across the Montana Valley. Dust swirled in golden clouds as the wild stallion reared, his dark mane whipping like a battle flag against the morning sky. In the center of the round pen, 7 months pregnant and gripping a lead rope with calloused hands, stood Cassie Reynolds. Before we jump back in, tell us where you're tuning in from. And if this story touches you, make sure you're subscribed because tomorrow, I've saved something extra special for you. Her boots found purchase in the churned earth as the horse lunged sideways, testing every ounce of her diminished balance. The baby kicked hard against her ribs, as if responding to the chaos surrounding them both. Sweat traced lines through the dust on her face, but her green eyes never left the stallion's wild gaze. "Easy, Thunder," she whispered, her voice carrying the kind of authority that came from 15 years of reading horse language. "Easy now." The Mustang snorted, his breath visible in the cool September air. For a heartbeat, horse and woman faced each other in perfect stillness. Then Thunder's muscles bunched, and Cassie knew what was coming. He charged. Most people would have run. Most pregnant women would never have been in that corral to begin with. But Cassie Reynolds had learned long ago that running solved nothing. She sidestepped with surprising grace for someone carrying another life, letting the rope slide through her gloved hands, just enough to maintain connection, without fighting the horse's momentum. Thunder hit the end of his lead and spun, confused by her refusal to engage in battle. In that moment of uncertainty, Cassie took a slow step forward. "That's right," she murmured. "We're not fighting today." The sun climbed higher over the Bitterroot Mountains, painting the landscape in shades of amber and rust. The Reynolds Ranch, spread across 200 acres of some of the most beautiful horse country in Montana, though beautiful didn't pay the bills. The weathered barn needed new roofing, the pasture fences saggy with age, and the ranch house hadn't seen fresh paint since Cassie's grandmother was alive. But the horses were magnificent. Cassie had inherited more than land when her grandfather died 3 years ago. She'd inherited his gift for understanding the language that wild horses spoke, the patience to earn their trust, and the stubborn determination to never give up on an animal others had written off as hopeless. She'd also inherited his debts. "Cassie." The voice came from the direction of the barn, sharp with concern. "What are you doing in there?" Maria Santos hurried across the yard, her dark hair escaping from its braid and her expression mixing exasperation with genuine worry. At 62, Maria had been the Reynolds family's closest neighbor and dearest friend for over 30 years. She'd helped deliver Cassie into the world, taught her to braid her first rope, and had been trying unsuccessfully to talk sense into her for the past 7 months. "Working," Cassie called back, never taking her eyes off Thunder. The stallion had settled into a wary standstill, his ears pricked forward as he tried to decipher this strange human who wouldn't fight or flee. "Working?" Maria reached the corral fence and gripped the top rail. "Mia, you're 34 weeks pregnant. You should be resting, not wrestling with a Mustang that could kill you." Cassie made a soft clicking sound, and Thunder's ears swiveled. Toward her, progress. "He's not trying to kill me, Maria. He's trying to understand me. Same difference with that one." Maria's weathered hands tightened on the fence rail. "I've seen him throw 3 grown men, strong men. Men who weren't carrying babies." The reminder of her condition sent a familiar ache through Cassie's chest. She'd been carrying this baby alone since the night Danny Morrison walked out of her. Life with nothing but a note on the kitchen table and a promise that he wasn't ready for the responsibility. 7 months of doctor's appointments attended solo. 7 months of preparing for a future that looked nothing like what she'd imagined. 7 months of proving to everyone around her that she could handle whatever came her way, including breaking the most dangerous horses in 3 counties. "Mrs. Patterson called this morning," Maria said, her voice gentling. "The bank loan officer." She wanted to remind you that the payment is due next week. Cassie's hand instinctively moved to her belly, where the baby seemed to sense her spike of anxiety and responded with a series of sharp kicks. $15,000. That's what she needed to keep the ranch from going into foreclosure. $15,000 that might as well have been $15 million for all the chances she had of raising it. I know, she said simply. And Henderson's called yesterday. They're willing to pay cash for the south pasture. It would be enough to cover the loan and give you something to start over with somewhere else. Start over. The words hit harder than thunder's hooves against the fence. Start over meant selling the land her great-grandfather had homesteaded in 1892. It meant abandoning the only home she'd ever known, the place where her parents were buried, where 3 generations of Reynolds women had raised their children and trained their horses. It meant admitting defeat. I'm not selling, Maria. Cassie, be reasonable. You can't keep doing this. Not alone. Not with a baby coming. Thunder snorted and pawed the ground, picking up on the tension in Cassie's voice. She forced herself to relax, to breathe deeply, and project the calm confidence that horses needed to feel safe. Her own fears had no place in this corral. Watch, she said quietly. She took another step toward Thunder, then another. The stallion's muscles tensed, but instead of fleeing or fighting, he held his ground. His dark eyes tracked her every movement, reading the subtle language of her posture, the rhythm of her breathing, the intention behind her approach. Easy, beautiful, Cassie whispered. Nobody's going to hurt you here. Thunder's ears flicked forward, then back, then forward again, a conversation without words. Slowly, carefully, Cassie raised her hand. The stallion trembled, but didn't move, as her fingers touched his neck just below his mane. There, she breathed. We're getting somewhere. For 3 heartbeats, horse and woman stood connected. Then a car door slammed somewhere near the house, and Thunder exploded backward, the spell broken. Mrs. Reynolds? An unfamiliar male voice called from the direction of the driveway. Mrs. Reynolds, are you here? Cassie sighed and stepped back, giving Thunder space to calm down. Through the corral fence, she could see a man in expensive suit, picking his way carefully across the yard, clearly trying to avoid stepping in anything that might damage his polished shoes. That'll be another creditor, Maria muttered. Or maybe a lawyer. They've been circling like vultures ever since word got out about the loan. The man approached the corral with the cautious air of someone who'd never been around large animals. He was young, maybe 30, with the soft look of someone who spent his days behind a desk. His briefcase gleamed with the same expensive sheen as his shoes. Mrs. Reynolds? I'm Brad Hutchinson from Mountain Valley Development. I wonder if we might have a word? Cassie studied his face, noting the practiced smile and the way his eyes quickly assessed the ranch's obvious financial struggles. She'd seen that look before from men who smelled opportunity in other people's misfortune. I'm busy, she said, not moving from Thunder's side. I can see that. Very impressive work you're doing there. His tone suggested he thought it was anything but impressive. I represent some investors who are very interested in your property. We'd like to make you an offer. Not interested. You haven't heard the terms yet. We're prepared to offer significantly more than the current market value. Enough to pay off your debts and leave you with a substantial profit. Thunder shifted restlessly, sensing the tension that seemed to follow these conversations. Cassie kept her voice level, but her grip tightened on the lead rope. I said I'm not interested. Mrs. Reynolds, please be reasonable. We know about the foreclosure proceedings. We know you're in an impossible situation. His voice took on the tone of someone explaining simple facts to a child. You're 7 months pregnant, working alone, trying to make a living breaking wild. Horses, that's not sustainable, and it's certainly not safe. The condescension in his voice made Cassie's jaw clench. Mr. Hutchinson, I'm going to give you one chance to get off my property before I let Thunder here explain to you personally why I don't need your advice about what's safe. Thunder, as if understanding his cue, snorted loudly and pawed the ground. Brad Hutchinson took a hasty step backward. There's no need for hostility, Mrs. Reynolds. We're trying to help. Help yourselves, you mean? Maria stepped forward, her small frame radiating protective fury. We know what you developers do. Buy up ranch land, subdivide it, build houses nobody from around here can afford. You're not helping anybody but your bank accounts. Hutchinson's practiced smile faltered. The offer stands, Mrs. Reynolds, but it won't stand forever. These investors have other options. Good, I hope they take them. Preparing and narrating this story took us a lot of time, so if you are enjoying it, subscribe to our channel. It means a lot to us. Now back to the story. After he left, picking his way back across the yard with wounded dignity, Maria shook her head. That's the third developer this month, Cassie. Word's getting out that the ranch might be available. It's not available. Then what's your plan? Because hoping for a miracle isn't a strategy. Cassie looked at Thunder, who had finally begun to relax again in the absence of the stranger. The stallion represented everything she was fighting for and everything she was fighting against. He was worth $3,000 if she could gentle him enough to ride. $3,000 that would barely make a dent in what she owed, but it was something. I've got 12 horses in training, she said, running the numbers in her head for the 100th time. If I can get them all rideable and find buyers, that's maybe $36,000. Enough to pay the loan and have something left over. If, Maria said pointedly. And that's assuming you can find buyers in this market. And assuming you can. Train them all before the baby comes. And assuming nothing goes wrong. Too many assumptions. Cassie knew it, but admitting it felt like giving up. I have to try, Maria. This ranch is all I have left of my family. It's all I have to give my child. Your child needs a living mother more than a piece of land. Before Cassie could respond, Thunder whinnied sharply, his head raised and ears pricked toward the road. In the distance, a dust cloud marked the approach of another vehicle. But this wasn't a car like the developer's sedan. This was a truck, moving fast and pulling what looked like a horse trailer. Now what? Maria muttered. The truck turned into the ranch's long driveway, and Cassie felt her stomach clench with recognition. It was Jake Morrison's rig, Danny's older brother. Jake ran the biggest training operation in the county, with facilities that made Cassie's modest setup look like a backyard hobby. He'd also made it clear that he thought Cassie was in over her head and should sell out before she got herself or someone else hurt. The truck pulled up near the barn, and Jake stepped out, his tall frame moving with the easy confidence of a man who'd spent his life around horses. At 45, he was successful, respected, and completely convinced that horse training was no job for a pregnant woman working alone. Cassie. He touched the brim of his hat in greeting, his gray eyes taking in the scene in the corral. Heard. You were working Thunder again. News travels fast. Fast enough. He leaned against his truck, his posture casual, but his attention focused entirely on her. Also heard Brad Hutchinson paid you a visit. Also travels fast. Small community. People talk. Jake's gaze shifted to Thunder, who was eyeing the newcomer with obvious suspicion. That's a dangerous horse, Cassie. Especially for someone in your condition. The phrase "your condition" was becoming the bane of Cassie's existence. As if being pregnant had somehow erased 15 years of experience and skill. Thunder's not dangerous. He's confused and scared. There's a difference. Is there? Because confused and scared horses have killed plenty of good trainers. Cassie felt the familiar surge of frustration that came with these conversations. Everyone seemed to think they knew what was best for her, what she should do, how she should live her life. No one seemed to consider that she might actually know what she was doing. Did you come here for a reason, Jake? Or just to tell me how? Dangerous my job is. Actually, I came to make you an offer. Another offer. Cassie's heart sank. If you're here to buy my land, not your land, your horses. Jake straightened, his expression growing serious. I'll buy your whole string. Every horse you've got in training. Pay you fair market value for them as they are. No training required. The offer caught Cassie off guard. It wasn't what she'd expected, and for a moment, she felt a flicker of hope. Fair market value for 12 horses would be. She did the math quickly. Maybe $24,000. Enough to cover the loan with something left over. Why would you do that? Because I need the horses, and you need the money. It's a business proposition that benefits us both. But even as relief began to wash over her, suspicion crept in. Jake Morrison didn't need her horses. He had access to the best bloodstock in the region, clients willing to pay premium prices for premium animals. Her collection of Mustangs and rescues couldn't compete with what he usually dealt with. There's a catch, she said. No catch. Just good business sense. You can't train them all before the baby comes, and you can't afford to keep feeding them through the winter. I'm offering you a way out, a way out. Just like the developers. Just like everyone else who thought they knew what was best for her. Cassie looked at Thunder, who had approached the fence again, drawn by curiosity despite his wariness. And what happens to them after you buy them? Jake's hesitation was barely perceptible, but Cassie caught it. They get trained, same as any horse. By who? My crew. Good trainers, all of them. And if they can't be trained, if they're too wild or too damaged? Another hesitation. Cassie, not every horse can be saved. The euphemism hit her like a physical blow. Not every horse can be saved. She knew what that meant in the horse world. The ones that couldn't be broken would be shipped to auction, sold for slaughter, their lives reduced to a few cents per pound. No, Cassie, be practical. I said no. Her voice carried the same authority she used with the horses, and Jake actually took a step back. These horses came to me because nobody else would take them. I'm not sending them somewhere they might end up in a kill pen. Then what's your alternative? You can't train them all, and you can't afford to keep them. Winter feed alone will bankrupt you. The truth of his words settled over her like a heavy blanket. She had 12 horses, a baby coming in 2 months, mounting debts, and winter approaching. Every logical voice in her head told her that Jake's offer was the smart choice, the practical choice. But Cassie Reynolds had never been particularly practical. I'll figure something out. Jake shook his head, his expression mixing frustration with what might have been genuine concern. You can't save them all, Cassie. Sometimes the best thing you can do is know when to quit. After he left, Maria helped Cassie put Thunder back in his paddock. The stallion had made remarkable progress in just one session, but progress didn't pay bills. Maybe you should consider Jake's offer, Maria said quietly as they walked back toward the house. It's not ideal, but it would solve your immediate problems. At the cost of sending these horses to slaughter, you don't know that would happen. Don't. Cassie paused at the porch steps, one hand pressed to her lower back where a persistent ache had been building all day. You didn't see his face when I asked about the ones that couldn't be trained. He's already written them off. The baby shifted restlessly, as if picking up on her agitation. Cassie rubbed her belly absently, trying to calm both herself and the child she carried. What other choice do you have? It was the question that haunted her every night, the one she couldn't answer. What choice did she have? Continue struggling against impossible odds, risking her own health and her baby's safety? Or give up everything she'd worked for, everything her family had built, and start over with nothing but the clothes on her back? The setting sun painted the mountains in shades of gold and crimson, the same colors that had captivated her great-grandfather when he first laid eyes on this valley over a century ago. 4 generations of Reynolds women had watched this same sunset from this same porch, each facing their own challenges, their own impossible choices, but none of them had faced those challenges. 7 months pregnant and completely alone, inside the house, the silence felt heavier than usual. Family photos lined the mantelpiece, documenting 100 years of Reynolds' history. Her great-grandmother, stern-faced and proud, standing beside a prize-winning mare. Her grandmother as a young woman, teaching Cassie's mother to ride. Her parents on their wedding day, young and hopeful and convinced they had all the time in the world. Dot and Danny. One photo remained of Danny Morrison, taken last Christmas before everything fell apart. Before the pregnancy, before the fear, before the note on the kitchen table that changed everything. Cassie picked up the photo, studying the face of the man who'd promised to love her forever, and then disappeared the moment forever became complicated. Part of her still hoped he'd come back, apologize, explain that he'd just been scared, and was ready now to be the father their child deserved. But hope was a luxury she couldn't afford. The baby kicked hard against her ribs, and Cassie set down the photo, pressing both hands to her belly. I know, little one. I know this isn't the life I planned for us, but I'm going to figure it out. Somehow. Outside, Thunder whinnied in his paddock, calling to the other horses scattered across the property. Each animal represented a story of survival against the odds, a second chance at life when the first chance had been stolen or squandered. They'd found their way to her ranch because she was the only trainer in 3 counties willing to take on the horses everyone else had given up on. The question was whether she could save them when she wasn't even sure she could save herself. The clock on the mantel chimed 9 times, marking another day surviving, another night to face alone. Tomorrow would bring new challenges, new impossible choices, new reminders of everything she stood to lose, but it would also bring new possibilities, new chances to prove that sometimes the most broken things could be made whole again. Cassie Reynolds had built her life on that belief. Now she just had to hope it was enough to carry her through the storm that was coming. The black Dodge Ram came down the mountain road like a storm cloud, its chrome bumper catching the early morning light as it navigated the winding turns with practiced ease. Cassie noticed it first as a distant glint through the kitchen window while she nursed her second cup of coffee, trying to summon the energy for another day of training. Horses that might not sell in time to save her ranch. The truck was expensive custom paint, premium tires, the kind of vehicle that cost more than most people made in a year. As it turned into her driveway, Cassie felt her shoulders tense. More developers probably. Or maybe lawyers this time, coming to discuss the foreclosure proceedings that seemed as inevitable as winter. But when the driver stepped out, her breath caught in her throat. He was tall, maybe 6'3", with the kind of broad shoulders that came from years of physical work rather than a gym membership. Dark hair showed beneath a black Stetson that had seen better days, and when he removed his sunglasses, his eyes were the deep blue of a Montana sky before a storm. Everything about him spoke of money, from his custom boots to the gold watch that caught the sunlight when he reached back into the truck. But he moved with the easy confidence of someone who'd earned his wealth rather than inherited it. Mrs. Reynolds? His voice carried a slight Texas drawl, warm honey over steel. I'm hoping you might have a few minutes to talk. Cassie remained on the porch, one hand resting on the rail for support. At 8 months pregnant now, her balance wasn't what it used to be, but her instincts were as sharp as ever. Rich men didn't drive up mountain roads to chat with struggling horse trainers unless they wanted something. Depends what you're selling. Mr. Carter. Logan Carter. He touched the brim of his hat, a gesture that seemed automatic rather than calculated. And I'm not selling anything. I'm looking to buy. My land's not for sale. I'm not interested in your land. His gaze swept past her to the corrals where several horses grazed in the morning sun. I'm interested in your horses. Specifically, your ability to train them. That was unexpected. Cassie studied his face. looking for signs of the condescension she'd grown accustomed to from men who thought pregnant women had no business around dangerous animals. Instead, she found genuine interest and what might have been respect. "I don't understand. Mind if I come up?" Talking business from a distance seems a bit impersonal. Against her better judgment, Cassie found herself nodding. Logan Carter climbed the porch steps with the fluid grace of someone comfortable in his own skin, removing his hat as he approached. Up close, she could see the fine lines around his eyes that spoke of years spent squinting against sun and wind, the small scar above his left eyebrow, the calluses on his hands that proved he was more than just money in expensive clothes. "Beautiful place you have here," he said, settling into one of the weathered chairs without being invited. "Your family's been here long?" "4 generations." The words came out sharper than she'd intended. "And before you ask, it's staying in the family." "Good. Too many old ranches are getting sold off to developers these days." He leaned back in, his chair completely at ease despite her obvious hostility. "Breaks my heart to see a good horse country turned into shopping centers." The comment caught Cassie off guard. Developers always talked about progress and growth. She'd never heard one express regret about destroying ranch land. "You said you were interested in my horses. Your training methods, specifically." Logan's eyes found Thunder in his paddock, where the stallion stood alert and watchful. "That's the Mustang that threw 3 men last month, isn't it? You know about Thunder?" "Word gets around in the horse community. They say he's unbreakable, dangerous. Most trainers won't even look at him anymore." Cassie felt her defensive walls rising. "Thunder's not dangerous. He's scared and confused." "There's a difference." "I know there is." Logan's voice carried a quiet certainty that made her look at him more closely. "Most people don't understand that fear and aggression often look the same from the outside. You sound like you know horses." "I should. I own the largest cutting horse operation in Texas." He said it matter-of-factly, without boasting, but Cassie felt her world tilt slightly. She knew the name Logan Carter now, knew it from the horse magazines that cluttered her coffee table, from the competition results that filled the back pages of every equine publication in the country. Logan Carter didn't just own horses. He was a legend. 3-time world champion, trainer of champions, the man who'd revolutionized cutting horse techniques and made a fortune doing it. His ranch outside Austin was featured in magazines, his training methods studied by professionals worldwide. And he was sitting on her porch, asking about her horses. "What do you want?" The question came out more suspicious than she'd intended. But Cassie had learned that when something seemed too good to be true, it usually was. "I want to offer you a job." The words hung in the air like smoke from a dying fire. Cassie stared at him, certain she'd misheard. "A job? Training horses, my horses specifically." Logan leaned forward, his expression growing serious. "I've got 12 cutting prospects that need work. Young horses with potential, but they're proving challenging for my regular crew." "Why?" "Because they're Mustangs. Wild horses that were rounded up last year and adopted through the BLM program. My regular trainers are excellent with bred horses, but they don't understand the Mustang mind the way someone like you would." Cassie's breath caught. She knew about the Bureau of Land Management's wild horse program, knew how difficult it was to find trainers willing to work with Mustangs. Most preferred the predictability of domestically bred horses to the complex psychology of animals that had lived free. "You want me to train wild horses. I want you to teach them to trust humans enough that my crew can finish their education." Logan's eyes found hers and held them. "From what I hear, you're the best Mustang trainer in 3 states. Maybe the best I've ever seen." The compliment sent an unexpected flush of warmth through Cassie's chest. When had anyone last told her she was good at what she did? When had anyone recognized her skills rather than her limitations? "I'm 8 months pregnant," I noticed. Logan's smile was gentle, understanding. which is why I'm proposing to bring the work to you rather than asking you to come to Texas." "What do you mean?" "I mean I load those 12 Mustangs into trailers and bring them here. You work with them in your own facilities, on your own schedule, at your own pace. When they're ready for the next phase of training, I take them home." Cassie's mind raced, trying to process what he was offering. 12 horses to train, presumably at premium rates given Logan Carter's reputation. It could be the answer to her financial problems, the miracle she'd been hoping for. But miracles usually came with catches. What's the pay? $5,000 per horse for initial gentling and basic ground manners. $60,000 total. The number hit her like a physical blow. $60,000. Enough to pay off the loan, cover her medical expenses, and have money left over to carry the ranch through winter, enough to save everything she'd been fighting for. "That's too much," she said automatically. Logan raised an eyebrow. "Is it? How much do you usually charge for Mustang training?" $3,000 per horse, but these aren't usual circumstances. These horses have defeated some of the best trainers in Texas. They're worth the premium. Rate to me because I believe you can succeed where others have failed." Cassie studied his face, looking for signs of pity or charity. She'd grown expert at recognizing the look of people who thought they were helping the poor, pregnant woman. Instead, she found something that looked remarkably like genuine respect. "Why?" she asked. "Why me specifically?" Logan was quiet for a moment, his gaze moving past her to the mountains that rose like sentinels around the valley. When he spoke, his voice carried a weight that suggested personal experience. "Because sometimes the people who've been broken themselves are the only ones who understand how to heal others." The comment was too perceptive, too close to truths Cassie kept buried. She wrapped her arms around her belly, feeling the baby stir restlessly inside. "You don't know anything about me. I know you're 7 months pregnant and still training a stallion that's hospitalized 3 men. I know you're facing foreclosure and turning down offers that would solve your problems because you won't abandon horses that need you." Logan's eyes found hers again. "I know you understand something about these animals that most trainers never learn. Which is, that trust can't be forced. It has to be earned, one small gesture at a time." The accuracy of his observation sent a chill down Cassie's spine. He was describing not just her training methods, but her entire philosophy about working with damaged horses. Most trainers focused on dominance, on breaking a horse's spirit until it submitted. Cassie had always believed in partnership, in finding ways to earn cooperation rather than demand it. "How do you know so much about my methods?" "I've been asking around, talking to people who've seen you work." Logan shifted in his chair, and Cassie caught a glimpse of something that might have been vulnerability in his expression. "The truth is, I've been looking for a trainer like you for months. Someone who understands that the hardest horses to train are often the ones worth the most effort. And you think I'm that trainer? I think you're the only trainer I've found who sees broken horses as puzzles to solve rather than problems to fix." The distinction was subtle but important. Problems got fixed with force and dominance. Puzzles required patience, understanding, and the willingness to see the world from another perspective. "What happens if I can't train them? If they're too far gone?" Logan's expression grew serious. "Then we figure out another solution. But I don't believe in horses that can't be saved, Mrs. Reynolds. I believe in horses that haven't found the right trainer yet." The philosophy was so similar to her own that Cassie felt tears prick her eyes. How long had it been since someone understood her approach, since someone else believed that every horse deserves a chance? "I'd need to see them first. The horses. Before I agree to anything. Of course. I wouldn't expect you to take the job blind." Logan reached into his shirt pocket and withdrew a business card. "My number's on there. Call me when you're ready, and I'll bring them up for you to evaluate." Cassie took the card, noting the expensive paper and embossed lettering. Everything about Logan Carter spoke of success, of a man who was accustomed to getting what he wanted. But there was something else, something in the way he watched her horses, the way he spoke about training methods that suggested deeper motivations. "Why Mustangs?" she asked suddenly. "If you're as successful as people say, why not stick with bred horses? They're easier, more predictable." For the first time since he'd arrived, Logan's confident facade cracked slightly. Maybe because easy and predictable don't always lead to greatness. Maybe because the most rewarding victories come from the hardest battles. Sounds like personal experience talking. Maybe it is. He stood, settling his hat back on his head. "I'll let you think about my offer, Mrs. Reynolds, but don't think too long. Those horses need help, and from what I can see, so do you." After he left, Cassie remained on the porch, staring at the business card in her hands. Logan Carter, champion cutting horse trainer, with an address in Austin, Texas, and a phone number that could change her life. The baby kicked hard against her ribs, as if responding to her elevated heart rate. $60,000. It was more money than she'd ever seen at once, more than enough to solve all her immediate problems. But accepting Logan Carter's offer would mean admitting she couldn't save her ranch on her own. It would mean depending on a stranger, trusting a man she'd just met with her future and her livelihood. Thunder whinnied from his paddock, the sound carrying across the valley like a challenge. The stallion had made remarkable progress over the past weeks, responding to her patient approach in ways that surprised even her. But progress with one horse wouldn't pay the bills or secure her future. She thought about Logan's words, about the way he'd described her training methods with an understanding that suggested genuine insight. Most people saw her work with Mustangs as dangerous foolishness. Logan Carter saw it as a specialized skill worth premium compensation. The question was whether she could trust him, whether his offer was genuine or just another attempt by a wealthy man to solve a poor woman's problems while serving his own interests. As if summoned by her thoughts, Thunder approached the fence nearest the house, his dark eyes fixed on her with the intense curiosity that marked their growing relationship. The stallion who'd been written off as untrainable was now seeking out human contact, choosing connection over isolation. Maybe Logan Carter was right. Maybe the most rewarding victories did come from the hardest battles. The sun climbed higher, over the Bitterroot Mountains, painting the valley in shades of gold and green that had captivated her family for generations. This land, these horses, this life she'd built from determination and stubbornness. It was all worth fighting for. The question was whether she had the courage to accept help from a stranger who might understand her better than she understood herself. Cassie folded the business card carefully and slipped it into her pocket. Tomorrow she would call Logan Carter and ask to see his 12 impossible horses. Tonight she would allow herself to hope that sometimes miracles came disguised as unexpected offers from mysterious strangers with kind eyes and understanding hearts. The baby shifted restlessly, and Cassie pressed her hand to her belly. "What do you think, little one? Should we trust the cowboy from Texas?" The response was a sharp kick that might have been approval or protest. Either way, it reminded her that her decisions affected more than just herself now. Whatever choice she made would shape her child's future as much as her own. But for the first time in months, she had a choice to make that didn't involve loss or surrender. For the first time since Danny had walked out of her life, someone was offering partnership instead of pity, opportunity instead of charity. It might be the answer to her prayers, or it might be the beginning of complications she couldn't even imagine. Either way, it was better than facing the future alone. The phone call came at 3 in the morning, jolting Cassie from the first decent sleep she'd managed in weeks. The baby had finally settled into a comfortable position. Her back had stopped aching, and she'd been dreaming of green pastures and gentle horses when the shrill ring cut through the darkness like a blade. "Reynolds Ranch," she mumbled into the receiver, still half asleep. "Cassie, It's Tom Brennan at the vet clinic. I'm sorry to wake you, but we've got a situation here. Dr. Brennan's voice carried the tight control of someone delivering bad news. Cassie sat up, instantly alert, her heart hammering against her ribs. Tom Brennan was the best large animal veterinarian in 3 counties, and he didn't make middle-of-the-night calls unless something was seriously wrong. What kind of situation? Maria Santos is here. She's been injured. The words hit Cassie like a physical blow. Maria, who'd been more mother than neighbor for the past 3 years. Maria, who checked on her daily, who worried constantly about. Cassie working alone, who'd been trying unsuccessfully to talk sense into her about accepting help. What happened? She's stable, but it's serious. Horse accident at Mitchell Place. She was trying to help John with a stallion that got loose, and it went bad. Broken ribs, punctured lung, possible internal bleeding. Cassie was already reaching for her clothes, the phone cradled between her shoulder and ear. I'm coming. Cassie. There's more. Tom's voice grew heavier. She's been asking for you. Keep saying something about the horses at your place, about making sure they're taken care of. I think she's worried about you being alone out there. The drive to the clinic passed in a blur of dark mountain roads and racing thoughts. Cassie's hands gripped the steering wheel with white-knuckled intensity, her mind refusing to process what a world without Maria Santos would look like. Maria had been the constant in her life, the voice of reason when Cassie's stubborn pride threatened to destroy everything she was fighting for. The clinic's waiting room was sterile and too bright, filled with the antiseptic smell that made Cassie's stomach churn. Tom Brennan emerged from the back looking exhausted, his usually immaculate scrubs stained with blood and dirt. How is she? Fighting. She's sedated now, but she was conscious when they brought her in. First thing she asked was whether someone was watching your horses. Tom's expression was grim, but gentle. She said you'd try to handle everything yourself and end up getting hurt. Can I see her? For a few minutes, but Cassie. Tom paused, his weathered face showing every one of his 60 years. She's not good. The next 24 hours will tell us a lot, but you need to prepare yourself for the possibility that she might not make it. Maria looked impossibly small. In the hospital bed, surrounded by machines that beeped and hummed with electronic vigilance. Her face was pale beneath the oxygen mask, her gray hair spread across the pillow like spilled silver. But her eyes were alert when Cassie entered, and her hand moved weakly in greeting. Mia, her voice was barely a whisper, but it carried the same warmth that had comforted Cassie through every crisis of her adult life. You came. Of course I came. Cassie took Maria's hand, careful of the IV lines that snaked across her arm. Don't try to talk, just rest. Can't rest, need to. Need to tell you something. Maria's eyes were urgent, pleading. The horses. You can't handle them all alone. Not with the baby coming. Not now. Maria, please, listen to me. Maria's grip tightened with surprising strength. Call the cowboy, the one from Texas. Let him help. I don't need. Yes, you do. Maria's voice carried the authority of someone who'd spent decades watching over stubborn women who wouldn't admit their limitations. Pride won't keep you safe. Pride won't feed your baby. Call him. Before Cassie could respond, the monitors began alarming, and Tom Brennan rushed in with a nurse. Cassie was gently but firmly escorted from the room as medical professionals swarmed around the woman, who'd been her anchor for so many years, thought the drive home felt like traveling through a nightmare. The ranch looked different in the pre-dawn darkness, somehow smaller and more vulnerable than it had that morning. Thunder whinnied from his paddock as her headlights swept across the yard, and the sound seemed lonely in the vast Montana silence. Inside the house, Cassie tried to process what had happened. Maria was fighting for her life in a sterile hospital room, and the future that had seemed merely difficult that morning now felt impossible. Without Maria's daily help, her constant presence, her willingness to handle the dozen small emergencies that arose on any working ranch. How could Cassie manage everything that needed doing? The baby kicked hard against her ribs, as if sensing her mother's distress. Cassie pressed both hands to her belly, feeling the strong movements that reminded her she wasn't just responsible for herself anymore. In 6 weeks, maybe less, she'd have a newborn to care for. How could she train horses, maintain the ranch, and raise a child completely alone? The business card Logan Carter had given her lay on the kitchen table where she'd left it, the expensive paper catching the lamplight. His offer echoed in her memory: $60,000 to train 12 Mustangs, enough to save the ranch and secure her future. But accepting would mean admitting she couldn't handle her life alone, acknowledging that maybe everyone who'd been telling her to be practical was right. Dawn was breaking over the mountains when Cassie made her decision. She picked up the phone and dialed the number on Logan's card, half hoping he wouldn't answer, that she could tell herself she'd tried, but circumstances had intervened. He answered on the second ring, his voice alert despite the early hour. "Carter. Mr. Carter, this is Cassie Reynolds, in Montana, Mrs. Reynolds." She could hear the surprise in his voice, followed quickly by concern. "Are you all right? You sound upset." The simple question, asked with genuine care by someone who barely knew her, nearly undid her composure. "There's been an accident. My neighbor, my friend. She's in the hospital." "I'm sorry to hear that. Is there anything I can do?" "Actually, yes." Cassie took a deep breath, steeling herself for what felt like surrender. "Your offer, the 12 horses. I'd like to hear more about it." The silence on the other end of the line stretched long enough that Cassie wondered if the connection had been lost. When Logan finally spoke, his voice was careful, professional. "Are you sure? Yesterday you seemed pretty determined to handle things on your own. Yesterday I had help. Today I don't." The admission came out harsher than she'd intended. "Look, if the offer's still open, I'd like to discuss terms. If not, I understand. It's still open. In fact, I was planning to call you later today. I'm already in Montana." "You're here?" "Drove up yesterday evening. I'm staying at the hotel in town. I thought if you decided to take the job, it would be easier to transport the horses if I was already in the area." The fact that he'd driven 600 miles on the chance she might accept his offer said something about his commitment to the project, or his confidence in his ability to persuade her. "When can you bring them?" "This afternoon, if you're ready." "But Mrs. Reynolds, I want to be clear about something. This isn't charity, and it's not a rescue mission. I'm offering you this job because I believe you're the best person for it. Don't take it unless you want it, not because you feel like you don't have other choices." The distinction mattered more than Logan probably realized. Cassie had been offered charity and pity for months. No one had offered her a job based on her skills and abilities. "I want it." "Good. I'll see you around 2 o'clock. After she hung up, Cassie walked out to the barn to assess her facilities. The 12 stalls were clean but basic, built for function rather than beauty. Her round pens were adequate, her equipment functional, if not state-of-the-art. Would it be enough for the kind of horses Logan Carter trained? Thunder approached the fence as she passed his paddock, nickering softly in greeting. The stallion had become almost gentle over the past weeks, his aggressive posturing replaced by curious interest in human interaction. Cassie scratched his neck, feeling the warmth of his coat beneath her fingers. "What do you think, boy? Am I making a mistake?" Thunder's response was to push against her hand, seeking more attention. For a horse that had been written off as untrainable, he developed a remarkable capacity for trust. Maybe that was what Logan Carter was betting on. Maybe he understood that the most damaged creatures often had the greatest capacity for transformation once they found someone willing to invest the time and patience they needed. The truck convoy arrived precisely at 2 o'clock, a procession of expensive vehicles that looked out of place on the dusty ranch road. Logan's black Ram led the way, followed by 2 massive horse trailers pulled by matching trucks. The entire operation spoke of serious money and professional competence. Logan stepped out of his truck wearing work clothes, this time-faded jeans, scuffed boots, and a shirt that had seen actual labor. The transformation made him seem more accessible, less like a wealthy stranger, and more like someone who understood the realities of working with horses. Mrs. Reynolds. He touched his hat brim, the gesture becoming familiar. Ready to meet your new students? Behind Logan came 2 other men, both with the weathered look of professional horsemen. The older one, maybe 50, had the bearing of someone accustomed to giving orders. The younger was perhaps 30, lean and alert, with the quick reflexes that marked experienced animal handlers. "This is Frank Morrison, my ranch foreman, and Jamie Wells, one of my trainers," Logan said. "They helped me select the horses we brought you." Frank stepped forward, his handshake firm but brief. "Ma'am, Logan's told us a lot about your work with Mustangs. Looking forward to seeing your methods." The comment surprised Cassie. She'd expected skepticism from Logan's crew, doubt about her abilities, perhaps even resentment that their boss had sought outside help. Instead, Frank's tone suggested genuine professional interest. "These horses have given us quite an education," Jamie added with a rueful smile. "We're hoping you can teach us a few things about reading Mustang psychology." Logan moved toward the first trailer, his hand on the latch. "Before we unload them, I want you to understand what we're dealing with. These aren't just Mustangs, they're problem Mustangs. Horses that defeated other trainers, animals that were headed for auction before I intervened." "What kind of problems?" "Fear-based aggression mostly. Some have been mishandled, others are just too intelligent for conventional training methods. They've learned that humans can't be trusted, and they're not interested in giving anyone second chances." The description could have applied to Cassie herself after Danny's betrayal. Perhaps that's why Logan thought she could reach these horses, because she understood what it felt like to have trust broken by someone who was supposed to care. "Let me see them." Logan opened the trailer, and Cassie got her first look at her. New charges. 12 horses stood in padded stalls, and even in the confined space, their quality was obvious. These weren't random Mustangs, they were carefully selected animals with exceptional conformation and bloodlines. The first horse Logan let out was a bay mare, perhaps 4 years old, with the refined head and athletic build that marked superior breeding. But her eyes held a wildness that spoke of recent freedom and current fear. "This is Sage," Logan said, holding the mare's lead rope with practiced confidence. "Captured in Nevada last year. She's never been successfully haltered, much less ridden." Sage's nostrils flared as she took in the new environment, her muscles tense with readiness to flee or fight. But beneath the fear, Cassie could see intelligence and spirit that hadn't been broken by captivity. "She's beautiful." She's also sent 3 trainers to the hospital. The last one required 20 stitches after she caught him with a front hoof. One by one, Logan and his crew unloaded the other horses. Each animal told a story of failed attempts at domestication, of humans who'd tried to force submission rather than earn cooperation. Cassie studied each horse, reading the body language that revealed their individual traumas and triggers. A black gelding named Storm had clearly been rope burned around his neck, the scars visible beneath his winter coat. A paint mare called Wildfire flinched every time someone raised their hand above shoulder height. A gray stallion named Tempest showed signs of having been kept in too small spaces, his movements constricted and anxious. "They've all been through the ringer," Frank observed, watching Cassie's assessment. Previous owners tried every trick in the book around penwork, natural horsemanship, even some old-school bronc busting. Nothing took. "Because they were trying to fix the horses instead of understanding them," Cassie said quietly. "You can't force trust. You have to create conditions where trust becomes possible." Logan nodded, and she caught something that might have been approval in his expression. That's exactly what we're hoping you can do. Give them a reason to trust humans again. As they moved the horses into their new stalls, Cassie felt the weight of responsibility settling over her shoulders. 12 damaged animals, each representing thousands of dollars of investment and months of potential work. Logan Carter was betting his reputation and his money on her ability to reach horses that others had given up on. But as she watched the Mustangs explore their new environment, she felt something she hadn't experienced in months: excitement. These horses represented more than financial salvation. They were puzzles to solve, challenges that would test every skill she developed over 15 years of working with difficult animals. "When do you want to start?" Logan asked. "Tomorrow morning. I'll need tonight to observe them, see how they settle in, get a sense of their individual personalities." "Fair enough. Frank and Jamie will stay in town for a few days, help you get oriented. After that, we'll leave you to work in peace and check back in a couple of weeks." The arrangement sounded reasonable, but Cassie sensed there was more to Logan's plan than he was revealing. Men like Logan Carter didn't invest $60,000 in a project and then walk away without supervision. "What aren't you telling me?" Logan's smile was rueful, caught in partial deception. "Nothing that affects your work with the horses. But I'd like to stick around for a while if you don't mind. Call it professional curiosity. I want to learn your methods firsthand." "For how long?" "As long as it takes." The vague answer sent warning bells through Cassie's mind. Having Logan Carter observe her work would be like performing surgery under a microscope, every mistake magnified, every technique scrutinized by one of the most successful trainers in the country. But the alternative was sending him away and losing the only chance she had to save her ranch. "All right," she said finally, "but I work my way, at my pace. No interference, no suggestions unless I ask for them." "Understood." As the sun set over the Bitterroot Mountains, Cassie stood in the barn aisle surrounded by 12 horses that represented her last hope for financial survival. Tomorrow she would begin the delicate process of earning their trust, of proving that not all humans were enemies. The challenge was enormous, the timeline uncertain, and the stakes higher than she'd ever faced. But for the first time in months, she wasn't facing those challenges alone. Logan Carter had brought her more than horses and money. He'd brought professional respect, competent help, and the chance to prove that sometimes the most broken things could be made whole again. Whether that applied to horses or people remained to be seen. The morning mist hung over the valley like a whispered promise as Cassie made her way to the barn for her first full day working with Logan's Mustangs. She'd been awake since 4, unable to sleep with 12 new horses on the property, and the weight of expectation pressing against her chest. Like a physical thing, Logan was already there. She found him leaning against the barn door with a cup of coffee in his hands, watching the horses through the early morning light. He'd trade his expensive hat for a worn baseball cap, and his boots showed the kind of scuffs that came from actual work rather than fashion statements. "You're up early," Cassie observed, accepting the second cup of coffee he offered. "Old habit. Horses don't care if you're tired." He nodded toward the stalls where soft nickering and the sound of hay being pulled from nets indicated the Mustangs were settling into their morning routine. "How'd they sleep?" "Better than I expected." Sage was restless for the first few hours, but she finally settled. "Storm barely moved all night. I think he's exhausted from the stress of transport." Logan's eyebrows rose slightly. "You stayed up watching them?" First night in a new place is crucial for horses. If they can't relax enough to eat and drink, everything else becomes harder. It was basic horsemanship knowledge, but Logan nodded as if she'd shared profound wisdom. "That's exactly what Frank said you'd do. He's got a good eye for reading trainers." They walked into the barn together, and Cassie felt the familiar peace that came from being surrounded by horses in the early morning. Each animal had its own personality, its own way of greeting the day. Sage whickered softly when she saw Cassie, while Tempest retreated to the back of his stall with suspicious eyes. "Tell me about your approach," Logan said, settling onto a hay bale with his coffee. "I know you specialize in Mustangs, but what makes your methods different?" Cassie paused at Wildfire's stall, noting how the paint mare flinched when shadows moved near her head. "Most trainers focus on controlling the horse's body. I start with understanding the horse's mind," meaning every behavior tells a story. Wildfire here flinches when anything moves above her head level. That tells me someone hit her, probably repeatedly, probably when she was tied and couldn't escape. Cassie's voice carried the quiet anger that always accompanied discussions of animal abuse. Traditional training would try to desensitize her to overhead movement through repetition. I'd rather figure out why she needs to flinch and give her reasons not to. Logan set down his coffee cup, his attention completely focused on her explanation. "How do you do that?" "By proving that my hands near her head bring good things instead of pain. Food, scratches, relief from flies. Let her brain create new associations instead of fighting the old ones. That sounds like it would take a long time. Longer than force, yes, but the results last. A horse that chooses to trust you will work harder and longer than one that submits, because it has to." Logan was quiet for several minutes, watching as Cassie moved from stall to stall, greeting each horse individually. Some responded with cautious interest, others with open hostility, but she treated each animal with the same calm respect. "You said something yesterday about these horses being too intelligent for conventional training methods," Cassie said, pausing at Storm's stall. "What did you mean?" "Exactly what you just described. These aren't the kind of horses that accept dominance because a human says so. They think their way through situations, weigh options, make decisions based on past experience." Logan joined her at Storm's stall, studying the black gelding who stood with his head turned away from them. "Storm has figured out 17 different ways to defeat round pen training. He'll go through the motions of submission, then test your vigilance the moment you relax." "Intelligent horses are always the hardest to train," Cassie agreed. "They remember everything good and bad. But they're also the most rewarding to work with once you earn their respect." "Is that what happened with Thunder? You earned his respect?" The question caught Cassie off guard. She'd been so focused on Logan's horses that she'd almost forgotten about her own ongoing project with the stallion. "Thunder's different. He was never really wild. He was a ranch horse that got spooked and went feral after his owner died. What he needed wasn't training so much as reminding." "Remember what?" "That humans could be partners instead of predators." Logan studied her face with an intensity that made Cassie self-conscious. "Sounds like personal experience talking." The comment hit closer to home than she was comfortable with. Maybe I understand what it's like to have your trust broken and need time to rebuild it." Danny Morrison. Cassie's head snapped up, surprised that Logan knew the name. "How do you small community people talk?" Logan's voice carried no judgment, only gentle understanding. "Frank mentioned that Danny's brother Jake tried to buy your horses. Said there was family history there." The casual mention of her most painful memories should have made Cassie angry. Instead, she felt oddly relieved that the subject was finally in the open. "Danny promised me forever and delivered 6 months ago. Left me pregnant and alone because he decided he wasn't ready for responsibility." The words came out flatter than she'd intended, drained of the emotion that had once made them impossible to speak. His loss, the simple statement, delivered without pity or false sympathy, made Cassie's throat tight. "Most people think I'm better off without him. Are you?" The question forced Cassie to consider something she'd been avoiding for months. Was she better off without Danny? The practical answer was obvious. He's proven himself unreliable, selfish, unwilling to face difficult situations. But the emotional answer was more complicated. "I'm stronger without him," she said finally. Whether that makes me better off depends on what you value more, security or independence. What do you value more? I used to think of independence. Now ... double quotes. Cassie placed her hand on her belly, feeling the baby's morning movements. Now I think maybe the strongest people are the ones who know when to accept help. It was as close to an admission of vulnerability as she'd ever made to someone. She barely knew, and the moment it left her lips, she regretted it. But Logan simply nodded as if her honesty was something to be treasured rather than exploited. Smart philosophy. Took me longer than it should have to learn that lesson. What do you mean? Logan was quiet for so long that Cassie thought he might not answer. When he finally spoke, his voice carried the weight of old paint, carefully controlled. I built my reputation on being the trainer who could handle any horse, solve any problem. Took pride in never asking for help, never admitting when I was in over my head. He paused, his gaze fixed on something beyond the barn walls. Cost me the best horse I ever worked with and nearly destroyed my career. What happened? A stallion. Named Maverick. Brilliant cutting horse, but he'd been severely abused before I got him. I was young, arrogant, convinced I could fix any problem with enough skill and determination. Logan's hands clenched unconsciously as he relived the memory. Spent 2 years fighting him instead of trying to understand him. When he finally broke, really broke, I had to put him down. The admission hung in the air like smoke from a dying fire. Cassie understood now why Logan had sought her out, why he was willing to pay premium rates for Mustang training. He was trying to save horses he couldn't save himself, working through old guilt by giving other damaged animals the patient understanding he'd failed to provide when it mattered most. I'm sorry. Taught me that sometimes the strongest thing you can do is admit you don't have all the answers. Logan's eyes found hers, and she saw depths of regret that matched her own experience with loss. These 12 horses are my second chance to do things right. The confession created a bridge between them, a shared understanding of what it meant to carry failure and hope for redemption. Cassie felt the careful wall she'd built around her emotions begin to crack, not from pressure but from recognition. We should get started, she said, needing to move before the moment became too intimate. They began with Sage, the bay Mari who defeated 3 previous trainers. Cassie entered the stall slowly, letting the horse see her approach from every angle. Sage's muscles tensed, ready for fight or flight, but Cassie simply stood at the stall entrance, making no demands. What are you doing? Logan asked quietly. Letting her get used to my presence without feeling trapped. She needs to know I won't chase her or corner her. For 15 minutes, Cassie simply existed in Sage's space, occasionally shifting position but never advancing toward the Mar. Gradually, Sage's tension began to ease. Her ears, which had been pinned flat against her head, began to move forward and back, tracking sounds and assessing threats. Now watch, Cassie murmured. She took a single step backward, increasing the distance between herself and the mare. Sage's head came up, ears pricked forward with surprise. Humans always moved closer, always invaded space. This human was giving space back. You're rewarding her for calm behavior by removing pressure, Logan observed. Exactly. Most training adds pressure to get a response. I'd rather remove pressure to reward the response I want. Over the next hour, Cassie repeated the process with each horse, spending just enough time in each stall to begin establishing her presence as non-threatening. Logan watched intently, occasionally asking quiet questions, but mostly observing her techniques with the focused attention of someone trying to learn. This is going to take longer than 2 weeks, he said as they finished the morning's work. Good training always does. You can't rush trust any more than you can rush pregnancy. The comparison made Logan smile, the first genuine expression of amusement she'd seen from him. How much longer? Depends on the horse. Sage might be ready for haltering in a week. Storm could take a month or more. They'll each move at their own pace. What if we run out of time? It was a practical question, but Cassie heard the deeper concern beneath it. Logan had invested significant money and reputation in this project. He needed results, not just promises. Then, we'll have 12 horses that are further along than when we started. Progress isn't always about reaching the finish line. Sometimes it's about moving in the right direction. Logan studied her face, and Cassie felt exposed under his scrutiny. You really believe that? I have to. Otherwise, every horse I couldn't save would be a failure instead of a step forward. The afternoon brought unexpected visitors. Frank Morrison arrived with supplies and updates from Texas, followed shortly by Dr. Brennan with news about Maria's condition. The combination of professional, horsemen and medical concerns created a strange intersection of Cassie's two worlds. She's stable, Dr. Brennan reported, accepting the cup of coffee Logan offered. Conscious, complaining about the food, asking when she can go home. All good signs. Relief flooded through Cassie like warm water. When can I see her? Tomorrow, probably. But she's already asking about your horses. I want to know if you're managing all right on your own. Cassie glanced at Logan, who was discussing feed schedules with Frank near the barn entrance. I'm not on my own anymore. Dr. Brennan followed her gaze, his expression knowing. Logan Carter, right? Heard he was in town. Also heard he brought you some business. 12 horses worth of business. Good for you. About time something went your way. Dr. Brennan's weathered face creased with approval. Maria will be pleased. She's been worried sick about you trying to handle everything alone. After the veterinarian left, Cassie found Logan working with Storm, simply standing in the gelding stall and letting the horse grow accustomed to his presence. He'd clearly been watching her methods and adapting them to his own approach. He's starting to relax, Logan observed as Storm's head dropped slightly, a sign of decreasing tension. You're a quick study. Good teachers make learning easier. Logan stepped back from Storm, respecting the horse's need for space. Frank thinks we should extend our stay. Says these horses need more time than we originally planned. The news should have been welcome. More time meant better training, higher chances of success. But it also meant more time with Logan Carter. More opportunities for the growing connection between them to complicate her carefully controlled life. How much more time? Maybe a month, possibly longer, depending on their progress. A month of working alongside Logan, learning from his experience, while sharing her own knowledge. A month of morning conversations over coffee, of shared understanding about the psychology of damaged animals, of slowly building trust that extended beyond horses to the humans working with them. All right, Cassie said, trying to ignore the flutter of anticipation in her chest. But the same rules apply. I work my way, at my pace. Understood. As the sun set over the Bitterroot Mountains, painting the valley in shades of gold and amber, Cassie stood in the barn aisle surrounded by horses that were already beginning to show signs of progress. Sage had allowed her to approach within 3 feet. Wildfire had stopped flinching every time shadows moved overhead. Storm had actually looked directly at Logan without immediately retreating. Small victories, but victories nonetheless. Logan joined her at the barn entrance, both of them watching the horses settle into their evening routine. The comfortable silence between them felt natural, unforced, like the beginning of a partnership built on mutual respect and shared purpose. Thank you, Cassie said quietly. For what? For trusting me with your horses, for understanding what they need, for ... She gestured helplessly, unable to find words for the gift of professional respect he'd given her. For treating you like the expert you are, instead of the charity case everyone else sees. The accuracy of his observation made her breath catch. Yes, don't thank me for that. Thank me when we get all 12 horses rideable and find them good homes. And if we don't? Logan's smile was gentle, understanding. Then we'll have given them the best chance possible. Sometimes that has to be enough. As they walked back toward the house, Cassie felt something she hadn't experienced in months. The comfort of shared responsibility. Tomorrow would bring new challenges, new opportunities to prove that broken things could be made whole again. But tonight, she wasn't facing those challenges alone. The black sedan appeared on the mountain road like a bad omen, its city-clean paint and tinted windows standing out against the rugged Montana landscape like a formal suit at a barn dance. Cassie spotted it first from the round pen where she was working with Wildfire, the paint mare finally allowing a lead rope to be clipped to her halter after 2 weeks of patient work. "We've got company," she called to Logan, who was documenting Storm's progress in a leather notebook he carried everywhere. Logan looked up, his expression darkening as he recognized the vehicle. "That's not company, that's trouble." The sedan pulled into the ranch yard with deliberate precision, parking exactly parallel to the fence line, as if the driver was making a statement about order and control. Two men emerged, one in an expensive suit that screamed lawyer, the other in the uniform of a livestock inspector. Cassie's blood ran cold. Livestock inspectors only showed up when someone had filed complaints about animal welfare or facility conditions. After 15 years of running a clean operation, she'd never had an unannounced inspection. "Mrs. Reynolds?" The suited man approached with the predatory confidence of someone accustomed to delivering bad news. "I'm Richard Blackstone from the State Attorney's Office, and this is Inspector Davis from the Department of Livestock. We need to discuss some concerns that have been brought to our attention." "What kind of concerns?" Cassie kept her voice level, but her hand instinctively moved to her belly where the baby was now large enough to make her balance precarious. "Concerns about the welfare of the animals on this property. Specifically, reports that pregnant women and untrained volunteers are handling dangerous livestock without proper safety protocols." The accusation hit like a physical blow. Cassie felt Logan move closer, his presence solid and reassuring behind her left shoulder. "Who filed these reports?" Logan's voice carried the quiet authority of someone accustomed to being taken seriously. "That's confidential information, Mr." Blackstone paused, clearly recognizing Logan but wanting confirmation. "Carter, Logan Carter. These are my horses, and Mrs. Reynolds is working under my supervision as a contracted trainer." Inspector Davis stepped forward, clipboard in hand. "Mr. Carter, regardless of the contractual arrangements, we have reports of unsafe practices. Pregnant women working with unbroken Mustangs, inadequate facilities for containing dangerous animals. Potential violations of state regulations regarding livestock handling." "What regulations specifically?" Cassie demanded, her professional pride overriding her shock. Davis consulted his clipboard. "Montana Code 812701 requires that anyone handling livestock for commercial purposes maintain facilities that meet minimum safety standards. There are also questions about whether proper insurance is in place for this type of operation. My facilities have been inspected and approved for 15 years, Cassie said. I've never had a violation or a complaint. Circumstances change. Blackstone interjected smoothly. Pregnant women face different risk factors. Insurance companies take a dim view of dangerous activities undertaken by expectant mothers. The implication was clear. Someone had done their homework, identified potential vulnerabilities in Cassie's operation, and crafted complaints designed to shut her down at the worst possible moment. I'd like to see the specific complaints, Logan sighed, his tone remaining professional, but with an edge that suggested barely controlled anger. As I said, the complainants' identities are confidential. However, I can tell you that multiple sources have expressed concern about the safety of the animals and the people working with them. Multiple sources. Cassie's mind raced through the list of people who might want to see her operation shut down. Developers who wanted her land. Competitors who resented her success with difficult horses. Former clients who might hold grudges. Or Jake Morrison, whose attempt to buy her horses had been rejected. We'll need to conduct a full inspection of the facilities, Davis announced, already moving toward the barn. And we'll need to see documentation of your training methods, insurance coverage, and safety protocols. For the next 3 hours, Cassie and Logan watched as the inspector examined every aspect of the ranch operation. Davis photographed stalls, measured fence heights, tested gate latches, and documented anything that could potentially be construed as a safety violation. The horses sensed the tension. Sage paced restlessly in her stall, while Storm retreated to the far corner of his paddock with suspicious eyes. Weeks of patient progress seemed to evaporate as the animals reacted to the stress radiating from their handlers. The facilities appear adequate, Davis finally admitted, reviewing his notes. Fencing is secure, stalls are clean, water and feed systems are functional. Of course they are, Cassie snapped, her patience finally fraying. I've been running this operation longer than you've been an inspector. However, Davis continued, ignoring her outburst, there are legitimate concerns about a pregnant woman in her 3rd trimester working with untrained Mustangs. The liability issues alone, are between me and my insurance company, Cassie finished. Not the state of Montana. Blackstone stepped forward, his expression sympathetic in the way that lawyers practiced in mirrors. Mrs. Reynolds, no one is questioning your abilities as a trainer. But surely you can understand why people might be concerned about your safety, given your condition. My condition doesn't affect my ability to read horses or make sound judgment calls, doesn't it? Your balance is compromised, your reflexes are slower, your ability to move quickly is limited. What happens if one of these animals charges you? What happens to your unborn child if you're injured? The questions voiced every fear that had kept Cassie awake at night for months. The rational part of her mind acknowledged that pregnancy had indeed changed her physical capabilities, made certain activities more dangerous than they'd been before. But the stubborn part of her soul refused to admit that pregnancy made her incompetent. I've been working with these horses for 3 weeks without incident, she said. Every animal on this property has shown measurable improvement under my training. That may be true, but it only takes one incident to change everything. Blackstone's tone grew more patronizing. We're prepared to offer a compromise. Suspend operations until after your baby is born, and we'll recommend that no formal charges be filed. Charges? Logan's voice cut through the conversation like a blade. What charges? Reckless endangerment, potentially. Operating a commercial livestock facility without proper safety measures. Violation of state regulations regarding pregnant women in high-risk occupations. The threats were carefully constructed to sound official without being specific. Cassie recognized the tactic, create enough legal uncertainty to force compliance without having to prove actual violations. And if I refuse? Then we'll have no choice but to recommend that the state suspend your operation pending a full investigation. That could take months, during which time you'd be unable to work with any livestock. The ultimatum hung in the air like smoke from a burning building. Suspend her operation voluntarily or have it shut down by force. Either way, she'd lose Logan's contract, fail to train his horses, and default on her loan payments. Someone had planned this very carefully. I need time to consider your recommendation, Cassie said finally. Of course. We'll need an answer by the end of the week. After they left, Cassie and Logan stood in the barn aisle, surrounded by horses that seemed to sense their distress. Sage whinnied anxiously, while Wildfire paced in her stall with nervous energy. This isn't random, Logan said quietly. Someone orchestrated this. I know. The question is who? Someone who knows enough about your operation to identify potential vulnerabilities. Someone who understands state regulations and knows how to file effective complaints. Logan's expression was grim. Someone who wants you to fail badly enough to involve state authorities. Cassie thought about the various people who'd tried to buy her land, pressure her to sell, or convince her to abandon her operation. The list was longer than she'd realized. Jake Morrison? Danny's brother? Why would he want to shut you down? Because he tried to buy my horses and I refused. Because he thinks pregnant women have no business training Mustangs. Because ... Cassie paused, her mind working through possibilities she hadn't considered before. Because shutting me down would prove his point about my incompetence. Logan was quiet for several minutes, his attention focused on Storm, who had approached the fence with curious eyes despite the tension in the air. "There's something else," he said finally. "Something I didn't tell you about why I brought these horses here." Cassie felt her stomach clench. "What?" "I didn't just choose you because of your reputation with Mustangs. I chose you because I needed someone outside the usual network of trainers, someone who wouldn't be influenced by politics or pressure from competitors." "What kind of pressure?" Logan's jaw tightened. "There are people in the horse industry who don't like the idea of me working with wild horses. They think it damages the reputation of cutting horse breeding, legitimizing inferior bloodlines. Some of them have been quite vocal about their disapproval." "So your horses are controversial. My methods are controversial. My decision to prove that Mustangs can compete at the highest levels is controversial." Logan turned to face her fully. "I should have warned you that associating with this project might bring unwanted attention." The admission explained so much: why Logan had been willing to pay premium rates, why he'd driven 600 miles to find a trainer, why he'd seemed almost desperate to have her take the job. How unwanted. Unwanted enough that some people might try to sabotage the project by targeting the trainer. Cassie felt pieces clicking into place. The timing of the complaints, the specific nature of the accusations, the focus on her pregnancy as a liability, it all pointed to a coordinated effort to shut down Logan's Mustang project by eliminating his trainer. "They're not just trying to shut me down," she realized. "They're trying to shut down your program by destroying my credibility. That's what I'm afraid of." The baby kicked hard against Cassie's ribs, as if responding to her elevated stress levels. She pressed her hand to her belly, feeling the strong movements that reminded her of everything she had to lose. "What do we do?" "We could suspend operations voluntarily, like they suggested. Wait until after the baby comes, then restart the program. And lose 3 months of training time. Let the horses regress, damage their chances of successful placement." Cassie shook her head. "That's not a solution. That's surrender. Then we fight, but I need you to understand what that means. These people have resources, connections, influence. They're not going to stop with one inspection." The warning should have terrified her. Instead, Cassie felt the familiar surge of stubborn determination that had carried her through every crisis of her adult life. "Good. I'm tired of people thinking they can push me around because I'm pregnant." Logan's smile was fierce, approving. "In that case, we need to document everything. Every training session, every improvement, every safety protocol. Make it impossible for them to claim we're operating unsafely. And we need to find out who's behind the complaints. Frank's already working on that. He has contacts in the livestock inspector's office, people who might be willing to share information off the record." They spent the evening reviewing every aspect of the operation, documenting safety procedures that had become second nature, photographing facilities that met or exceeded state standards. By midnight, they'd created a comprehensive record of training methods and safety protocols. But documentation wouldn't be enough. If their opponents were willing to manufacture evidence or pressure officials to overlook facts in favor of politics. "There's one more thing," Logan said as they reviewed the day's training notes. "If this gets worse, if they escalate their attacks, you need to know that you can walk away. I'll find another way to train these horses." "No, Cassie, be practical. You're 8 months pregnant, facing foreclosure, dealing with harassment from state officials. You don't need this kind of trouble." "Yes, I do." Her voice carried the same quiet authority she used with the horses. I need to prove that fear and intimidation don't work on me. I need to show my child that some things are worth fighting for. Logan studied her face in the lamplight, reading the determination that had become as much a part of her as her green eyes and calloused hands. All right, then we fight together. The words carried weight beyond their immediate situation. Together they would face whatever attacks came next, protect the horses that depended on them, and prove that sometimes the most important victories came from refusing to surrender. Outside, thunder whinnied from his paddock, the sound carrying across the valley like a challenge to anyone who thought they could break the spirits of those who'd learned to trust again. The battle for Cassie's operation and Logan's Mustang project was just beginning. The contractions started at dawn on the day they were supposed to give their answer to the state inspectors. Cassie felt the first one while checking on Sage, a tightening across her belly that made her pause mid-step and grip the stall door for support. She'd been having Braxton Hicks contractions for weeks, but this felt different, deeper, more purposeful. She was only 36 weeks along, too early. Just stress, she whispered to herself, forcing her breathing to remain steady. Just stress from everything that's been happening. But when the second contraction hit 20 minutes later, followed by a third 15 minutes after that, Cassie knew she was lying to herself. Logan found her sitting on a hay bale outside Storm's stall, timing contractions with the stopwatch function on her phone. His expression went from concern to alarm in the space of a heartbeat. "How long?" he asked, moving to her side without hesitation. 2 hours. They're still irregular, but getting stronger. Another contraction gripped her, and Cassie closed her eyes, breathing through the wave of pressure that felt like her body was preparing for something she wasn't ready for. "We're going to the hospital." No, the word came out sharper than she'd intended. Not yet. First babies take hours, sometimes days. And we have to give Blackstone our answer by 5 o'clock. Cassie, be reasonable. I am being reasonable. She stood carefully, one hand pressed to her lower back where a persistent ache had been building all morning. Dr. Henley said early labor can last 12 hours or more. We have time to finish what we started. Logan's expression suggested he thought she'd lost her mind, but before he could argue, the sound of approaching vehicles cut through their conversation. A convoy of trucks was coming up the mountain road, not the sleek sedans of state officials, but the practical pickups and stock trailers of working horsemen. "What the hell?" Logan muttered, moving toward the fence for a better view. The first truck to arrive bore the logo of Morrison Ranch, and Jake Morrison climbed out with the confident stride of a man who believed he was in the right. Behind him came 3 other trucks, each carrying men Cassie recognized as prominent horse trainers from around the region. "Mrs. Reynolds, Mr. Carter." Jake touched his hat brim with mock courtesy. "Heard you folks were having some trouble with the state inspectors." "Nothing we can't handle," Cassie replied, though another contraction was building and she had to concentrate to keep her voice steady. "See, that's where we disagree." Jake gestured to the men gathering behind him. "These gentlemen represent the Montana Horse Trainers Association. We've been discussing the situation with your operation, and we've got some concerns." Logan stepped forward, placing himself slightly between Jake and Cassie. "What kind of concerns?" "The kind that affects the reputation of our entire industry." A lean man with graying hair emerged from the second truck. Cassie recognized him as Tom Wheeler, one of the most respected trainers in the state. "When pregnant, women get hurt working with dangerous horses. It reflects badly on all of us." "No one's been hurt," Cassie said. "Yet." Jake's tone carried the patronizing quality that made Cassie's teeth clench. "But it's just a matter of time. And when it happens, every trainer in Montana will face increased scrutiny, higher insurance rates, more government interference." "So, you decided to create the problem before it could happen naturally," Logan observed, his voice dangerously quiet. "We decided to address a dangerous situation before it spiraled out of control." Wheeler pulled a folded document from his jacket pocket. We've prepared a petition, signed by 37 licensed horse trainers in Montana, requesting that the state suspend your operation pending a safety review. The document represented the collective power of the Montana horse industry, the unified voice of professionals who decided that Cassie Reynolds was a liability they couldn't afford. "You bastards," she breathed, feeling betrayal cut deeper than any physical pain. These were her peers, people she'd competed against and respected, trainers who'd known her work for years. "Language, Mrs. Reynolds," Jake chided. "No need for hostility. We're trying to help. Help yourselves, you mean." Another contraction gripped Cassie, stronger than the previous ones, and she couldn't hide the grimace of pain that crossed her face. Logan's attention snapped to her immediately. "Cassie, I'm fine." But even as she said it, she felt moisture between her legs and realized with a shock of fear that her water had broken. The baby was coming, ready or not. "You're not fine," Logan said, reading the panic in her eyes. "We're going to the hospital. Now, not until we deal with this." Cassie gestured toward Jake and his supporters, who were watching her obvious distress with expressions ranging from concern to satisfaction. "Mrs. Reynolds," Wheeler's voice gentled slightly, "you're clearly in labor. This isn't the time for confrontations. This is exactly the time." Cassie forced herself to stand straighter, to project strength she wasn't sure she possessed. "Because you think my pregnancy makes me weak, makes me incompetent, makes me a liability to your precious industry reputation. Your pregnancy makes you vulnerable," Jake corrected. "And vulnerability in our business gets people killed. My pregnancy makes me more careful, more thoughtful, more aware of consequences." Another contraction built, and Cassie wrote it out with gritted teeth. "I've never been a safer trainer than I am right now. That's not how insurance companies see it. That's not how lawyers see it. That's not how the state of Montana sees it." Wheeler's expression was sympathetic but implacable. "I'm sorry, Mrs. Reynolds, but the petition stands. Your operation is too much of a risk." The unified rejection hit harder than the physical pain of labor. These men had already decided her fate, written her off as a problem to be solved rather than a professional to be respected. "Then you're all cowards," she said quietly. The accusation sent a ripple of anger through the gathered trainers. Several men stepped forward, their faces flushed with indignation. "Cowards?" Jake's voice rose. "We're trying to protect the industry from a pregnant woman who threatens your monopoly on expertise." Cassie's voice carried the authority of someone who'd spent 15 years proving herself in a male-dominated field. "You're not worried about safety. You're worried about being shown up by someone you think should be home baking cookies." "That's enough," Wheeler said firmly. "Mrs. Reynolds, you're obviously in distress. Let us help you get to the hospital, and we can discuss this situation when you're thinking more clearly." The patronizing dismissal of her mental state, because of her physical condition, sparked a fury that burned through Cassie's pain and exhaustion. "I am thinking clearly. Clearly enough to see that you're using my pregnancy as an excuse to eliminate competition. Clearly enough to know that if I give in to your bullying, every other woman in this industry will face the same treatment. Competition?" Jake laughed harshly. "You think breaking a few Mustangs makes you competition for professional operations? I think Logan Carter thinks so, or he wouldn't have brought me 12 of his most challenging horses." The mention of Logan's involvement shifted the dynamic in the group. Several men glanced at Logan with expressions that suggested they knew more about his reputation than they'd let on. "Mr. Carter," Wheeler addressed Logan directly, "with respect, you've made a mistake here. Mrs. Reynolds may be skilled, but she's not equipped to handle the kind of project you've described. There are better alternatives, such as Morrison Ranch has facilities and staff that could handle your Mustangs properly. Professional trainers, full insurance coverage, state-approved safety protocols." The offer laid bare the real agenda. This wasn't about safety or industry reputation, it was about money. Jake Morrison wanted Logan's contract, and he was willing to destroy Cassie's operation to get it. Interesting proposition, Logan said mildly. What would you charge for training 12 problem Mustangs, market rate? Say $2,000 per horse. $24,000 compared to the $60,000 Logan was paying Cassie. The financial incentive for eliminating her competition was obvious. Counteroffer, Logan replied. Go to hell. The blunt rejection sent another ripple through the group. Jake's face flushed red with anger and embarrassment. Mr. Carter, be reasonable. You're dealing with an unstable situation here. Mrs. Reynolds is in labor. Her operation is under state investigation. Her insurance coverage is questionable. Why risk your investment on someone who clearly can't deliver? Another contraction. Hit, stronger than any before, and Cassie doubled over with a gasp of pain. Logan was at her side instantly, his arms supporting her as she rode out the wave of pressure that felt like her body was trying to tear itself apart. That's it, he said firmly. We're going to the hospital. Not yet. Cassie straightened with visible effort, her breathing shallow but determined. Not until we finish this. Cassie, you're scaring me. The baby will wait. She turned back to Jake and his supporters, her voice carrying the same quiet authority she used with frightened horses. You want to destroy my operation because you think pregnancy makes me weak. You think having a baby means I can't be trusted with important work. We think having a baby means you should be focused on more important things than proving points, Wheeler replied. More important than proving that women belong in this industry. More important than showing that motherhood and professional competence aren't mutually exclusive. More important than demonstrating that the best trainers are the ones who understand vulnerability because they've experienced it themselves. The questions hung in the air like smoke from a signal fire. For the first time since they'd arrived, the gathered men looked uncertain, as if they were beginning to understand the broader implications of their actions. Those are noble sentiments, Jake said finally. But sentiment doesn't change biology. Pregnant women face physical limitations that make certain activities unsafe. Agreed. Which is why I've modified my methods, increased my safety protocols, and worked with an experienced partner. Cassie gestured toward Logan. I haven't been reckless or careless. I've been adaptive. Adaptive enough to know when to stop. The question came from Wheeler, and Cassie heard genuine concern beneath the challenge. These men weren't entirely villains. They were professionals worried about liability and reputation in an industry where accidents could destroy careers, but they were also men who'd never had to prove their competence while growing another human being inside their bodies. Adaptive enough to know the difference between stopping and quitting. Another contraction built, and this time Cassie couldn't hide the intensity of her pain. But she waited until it passed before continuing. Stopping means recognizing when conditions require a pause. Quitting means surrendering to other people's fears. And which is this? Wheeler pressed. Cassie looked around the circle of men who held her professional future in their hands. Behind them, she could see the horses that represented everything she'd worked toward, animals that had begun to trust humans again, because someone had been patient enough to earn that trust. Logan's hand found hers, and she drew strength from the calloused fingers that had learned to be gentle with broken things. This is me choosing not to quit, she said quietly. This is me proving that the strongest thing a woman can do is know her own worth and refuse to apologize for it. The declaration sent a shock of silence through the group. Several men looked uncomfortable, as if they were beginning to recognize the implications of what they were asking her to do. Mrs. Reynolds, Wheeler said finally, his voice gentler than before. No one is questioning your worth. But worth isn't measured by refusing help when you need it. I'm not refusing help. I'm refusing to be bullied into abandoning everything I've worked for, because other people are afraid of taking risks. Another contraction hit, and this time Cassie's knees buckled. Logan caught her before she could fall, his strong arms supporting her weight as pain washed through her body like fire. "That's enough," he said firmly. "Petition or no petition, investigation or no investigation, she needs medical attention now." "The horses," Cassie gasped, looking toward the barn where 12 Mustangs waited for someone to prove they were worth saving. "We'll be here when you get back," Logan promised. "But right now, our baby needs you to be smart about priorities. Our baby." The words hit Cassie like a revelation. Somewhere in the past 3 weeks, Logan had claimed not just professional partnership, but personal responsibility. He was choosing to stand with her, to face whatever came next as a team rather than as separate individuals protecting separate interests. "All right," she whispered, leaning into his strength. "All right, let's go." As Logan helped her toward his truck, Jake Morrison called after them, "Mrs. Reynolds, what about our answer? The state is expecting a response by 5 o'clock. Cassie paused at the truck door, one hand pressed to her belly where a new life was demanding to be born. "Tell them the answer is no," she said. "We're not suspending operations. We're not backing down. And if they want to shut us down, they'll have to do it over our objections." The words carried across the ranch yard like a challenge thrown down before an army. As Logan's truck pulled away from the ranch, Cassie caught a glimpse of Jake Morrison's face in the side mirror, frustrated, angry, but also grudgingly respectful. She'd made her choice. Now she had to live with the consequences. But first, she had to bring a baby into the world, a child who would grow up knowing that some things were worth fighting for, even when the odds seemed impossible. The baby arrived 3 hours later, screaming with the indignant fury of someone who'd been forced to make an entrance before she was ready. Sarah Marie Carter, because Logan had insisted on giving his name to the daughter he claimed as his own, weighed 5 pounds, 12 ounces, and had her mother's green eyes and stubborn chin. "She's perfect," Logan whispered, cradling the tiny bundle with hands that had gentled 1,000 horses, but trembled slightly when holding this new life. "Absolutely perfect." Cassie watched from the hospital bed, exhausted but triumphant, as this man who'd entered her life as a stranger became the father her daughter would know. The sight of his weathered hands supporting Sarah's impossibly small head made her chest tight with emotions she wasn't ready to name. "Any word from the ranch?" she asked Dr. Henley, who was completing his final examination. "Frank's handling everything. Says the horses are settled and the state inspectors never showed." The elderly physician's expression was knowing. Funny how official pressure tends to evaporate when lawyers get involved. Logan's smile was satisfied, predatory. Amazing what a few phone calls can accomplish when you know which politicians depend on campaign contributions from successful businessmen. The revelation that Logan had used his influence to neutralize the state investigation should have bothered Cassie. Instead, she felt grateful that someone had finally fought fire with fire on her behalf. "What about the trainer's petition? Wheeler withdrew it this morning." Seems several of the signers reconsidered their position when they realized opposing Logan Carter might affect their access to his bloodlines. Logan's expression grew serious. "Jake Morrison's still making noise, but he's doing it alone now." Dr. Henley finished his notes and moved toward the door. "I'll leave you 3 to get acquainted. But Cassie, I want you to stay put for at least 2 days. Early babies need monitoring and you need rest." After he left, silence settled over the small room like a warm blanket. Logan sat in the chair beside Cassie's bed, still holding Sarah with the careful attention of someone who understood the weight of responsibility. "What happens now?" Cassie asked quietly. "Now we go home and finish training 12 horses. Now we prove that your methods work. Now we show the world that the best partnerships are built on trust instead of dominance. And us, what are we?" Logan was quiet for a long moment, his attention focused on Sarah's sleeping face. When he looked up, His eyes held depths of emotion that made Cassie's breath catch. "We're whatever you want us to be. Partners in business, partners in life, or something in between. I'm not going anywhere, Cassie. This little girl is mine now. And so are you, if you'll have me." The offer hung in the air like a bridge across uncertain water. Cassie studied Logan's face, reading sincerity and hope and careful vulnerability in his expression. "I don't know how to be half of a couple anymore." "Neither. Do one, but maybe that's okay. Maybe we can figure it out together, one day at a time." Sarah stirred in Logan's arms, making soft sounds that weren't quite cries, but suggested she was beginning to consider the possibility. He rose smoothly and placed her in Cassie's arms with practiced ease. "Where did you learn to hold babies?" "My sister's kids. I may be better with horses than people, but I know my way around an infant." Logan settled back into his chair, watching as Sarah rooted against Cassie's chest with instinctive hunger. "She's going to be beautiful. And stubborn, if she's anything like her mother. What about you? Are you planning to stick around long enough for her to inherit your patience?" "I'm planning to stick around long enough for her to inherit everything I have to give." Logan's voice carried the quiet certainty of a man who'd made his decision and found peace with it. "Montana's growing on me. Wide skies, good horse country, neighbors who mind their own business most of the time." The casual mention of permanent relocation made Cassie's heart skip. "You'd really leave Texas?" "I'd really leave anywhere if it meant staying here." His smile was gentle, understanding. "Home isn't a place, Cassie. It's the people who matter. Enough to fight for." 2 days later, they brought Sarah home to a ranch that felt transformed by her presence. Frank Morrison had maintained operations with military precision, keeping the horses on schedule and the facility spotless. But it was the small touches that revealed how thoroughly Sarah had already claimed her place, a crib that had appeared in the house's main bedroom. Baby supplies organized with the same attention to detail Logan applied to everything else, feeding schedules posted beside training charts. "You've been busy," Cassie observed, settling into the rocking chair Logan had positioned beside the living room window. Frank's wife drove up from Texas with supplies. She insisted on preparing for every possible need. Logan's expression was sheepish. "I may have mentioned that this was my first experience with a newborn." The admission that he'd reached out for help, admitted uncertainty, sought advice from people with more experience. It revealed a side of Logan that contrasted sharply with his usual confident competence. Over the following weeks, they established routines that blended horse training with infant care in ways that would have seemed impossible months earlier. Cassie worked with the Mustangs for shorter periods, taking breaks to nurse Sarah or simply hold her while observing the animal's progress. Logan proved surprisingly adept at baby care, changing diapers with the same methodical precision he applied to everything else. The horses responded to the changes with curiosity rather than alarm. Sage, the bay mare who'd been so suspicious of human contact, now approached the fence whenever she heard Sarah's cries. Storm actually seemed calmer with the baby's presence, as if the sound of new life reminded him that not all changes were threatening. "They understand," Cassie observed one morning, watching Wildfire nicker softly as Sarah fussed in her carrier. "They know she's important." "Animals always know what matters," Logan replied, adjusting the carrier's position so Sarah could see. "The horses. Maybe that's why they're better judges of character than most people." The comment reminded Cassie of the trainers who'd tried to destroy her operation, the officials who'd threatened her livelihood, the various people who'd assumed pregnancy made her incompetent. Their judgment had been clouded by fear and prejudice, while the horses had simply accepted her changing circumstances as part of the natural order. "Any word from Jake Morrison?" He withdrew his complaint to the livestock board, officially cited changed circumstances as reason. Logan's smile held a trace of satisfaction. "Unofficially, I think he realized that challenging me openly wasn't good for business. And the state investigation? Closed. Inspector Davis filed a report stating that your facilities exceed safety standards and your training methods are both humane and effective. Logan paused, his expression growing serious. He also noted that anyone questioning your competence clearly hadn't observed your work firsthand. The vindication felt sweet, but Cassie was more interested in practical outcomes than official recognition. What about the horses? How many are ready for advanced training? 8 of the 12 are halter broken and responsive to basic commands. 4 are ready to start saddle work. Sage is actually asking for attention now instead of just tolerating it. The progress exceeded Cassie's most optimistic projections. In 6 weeks, they'd transformed 12 problem horses into willing partners, proving that patience and understanding could accomplish what force and dominance couldn't. When do they go back to Texas? They don't. Logan's answer surprised her. I'm establishing a satellite facility here. Montana branch of Carter Cutting Horses, specializing in Mustang training and rehabilitation. The announcement represented a complete restructuring of Logan's business, a commitment to the methods and philosophy they'd developed together. That's a big decision. It's the right decision. These horses need more time than we originally planned, and this environment suits them. Besides, Logan gestured around the ranch that had become their shared home. I can't think of anywhere I'd rather build something permanent. The double meaning in his words made Cassie's pulse quicken. They'd been dancing around the question of their future for weeks, building partnership and intimacy, without defining exactly what they were becoming. Logan, about us, I love you. The words came out simply, without drama or grand gestures. I love your stubborn pride and your gentle hands and the way you see possibilities in broken things. I love watching you with Sarah, seeing how naturally you balance strength with tenderness. I love the life we're building together. The declaration should have terrified her. Instead, Cassie felt peace settle over her like warm sunlight. I love you too. I didn't expect to, didn't think I was ready for it, but I do. Logan's smile transformed his entire face, revealing joy that had been carefully guarded for too long. Does that mean you'll consider making this partnership official? Are you proposing? I'm asking if you'd be willing to take on a business partner who comes with strong opinions about horse training, an annoying tendency to overthink everything, and a complete willingness to spend the rest of his life proving he deserves your trust. Cassie looked around the ranch that had become more than just her inheritance. It was the foundation of everything they were building together. The horses grazed peacefully in pastures that would soon house Logan's breeding program. Sarah slept in Logan's arms with the contentment of a child who'd never known anything but security and love. I might be willing to consider such an arrangement, she said finally, assuming the business partner in question understands that this ranch operates according to Reynolds' family principles, which are patience over force, understanding over dominance, partnership over control. Cassie's voice carried the authority of someone who'd proven those principles worked, and the absolute conviction that broken things can be made whole again if someone cares enough to try. Logan's kiss was gentle, promising, filled with the understanding that they were sealing more than just their personal commitment. They were creating a legacy, a place where damaged horses could heal, where traditional methods could evolve, where a pregnant woman's determination had proven that the strongest victories came from refusing to surrender. Outside, thunder whinnied from his paddock, the sound carrying across the valley like a celebration. The stallion who'd once been written off as untrainable now served as a reminder that trust, once broken, could be rebuilt stronger than before. The future stretched ahead of them, like an unbroken horizon full of challenges and possibilities. Failures and triumphs, the daily work of proving that love was stronger than fear and partnership, more powerful than any individual effort. Sarah stirred in Logan's arms, opening green eyes that seemed to take in the world with calm curiosity. She would grow up on this ranch, surrounded by horses and mountains, and the example of parents who'd learned that the best things in life were worth fighting for. The drought that had once threatened to destroy everything had been replaced by abundance. The partnership that had begun as a necessity had become the foundation of something lasting. And in the barn, 12 Mustangs who'd learned to trust again stood as proof that sometimes the most broken things became the most beautiful when given the chance to heal. Up next, you've got 2 more standout stories right on your screen. If this one hits the mark, you won't want to pass these up. Just click and check them out. And don't forget to subscribe and turn on the notification bell so you don't miss any upload from us.